Welcome to the School of Laughs podcast, brought to you by schooloflaughs.com. Whether you're an aspiring comedian, a part-time pro, or a speaker who wants to become funnier, this is the podcast for you. We'll break down tools, tips, and techniques to help you get bigger, better, and more bookable. And now, here's the show.
Welcome to the podcast. Rick Roberts here. Hopefully you're having a great day wherever you are, doing whatever it is you do, masked, unmasked, distance, close, whatever it is. Hey, it seems like this is the land of opportunity, so just live your life the way you want to live it and let things fall where they may. That seems to be where we're at here with the pandemic in the United States at the beginning of August. Lots of numbers of cases, lots of deaths, lots of people ignoring guidelines, some people adhering to them, some people not being affected, some people being crushed by this pandemic. I just hope you're comfortable where you're at and you're in a good headspace. Hey, I've got a great guest on the show today. It's Dave Bricker, who is an expert at storytelling. Dave I met online. He lives down in Miami, Florida. When he was in college, he bought a boat, lived on it. After college, went on a big sailing trip to find stories and to meet characters, and he did all that. And he's written over 10 books since then. He's a great storyteller. He's a member of the National Speakers Association, and I'm excited to share him with you here in just a second. You're going to get a lot out of this episode. I do want to mention a couple things up close and up front in case you don't go much further than this. I'm going to do an online, live, Zoom writing class. So, sounds confusing. It's not. What I'm going to do is take the class that I usually teach here in Nashville live to students and do it live online for students anywhere who want to take the class. And because I don't have to rent space and travel down and back and forth and that kind of thing, and we're going to do it virtually and digitally, it's a one-time, first-time, super-duper half-off special, $99. Get you the 3 2-hour sessions. The sessions will be recorded in case you can't make all 3 sessions live and in person. So there's really no excuse not to learn all the great steps in writing great jokes. We're going to do this in August, Tuesdays, 3 Tuesdays. Okay, so get this down. Tuesday the 11th, 18th, which is my birthday. I'm going to do this on my birthday, and the 25th. So August 11, 18, 25th. We're going to do this Central Time, 8 till 9:45, 10 o'clock each night. All right. I don't know if that's too late for you guys wherever you live, but I want to do this when people are done with work, got the kids in bed, and you can have your full day and then focus on you before you go to bed. Again, this is going to be August 11, 18, and 25 from 8 till close to 10 o'clock each night. And it's going to be a lot of fun. Recorded for your benefit, $99 flat. And it's going to happen. So the class size is limited. I don't want to get to where it's top heavy. I want to be able to give focus to each student as we go through it. But it's going to be a great class. You're going to learn all about the keys to writing good jokes, where you get inspiration, where you don't get inspiration, how you craft a joke, the 4 key ingredients to a joke, things that makes jokes more interesting, more funny. And we're going to learn techniques to apply to what we write so we punch them up and give a specific reason for an audience to laugh. If you've been on the sidelines wondering when to jump in, now's a great time. If you've been doing comedy for a while but not had the success you needed and think you deserve, it could just be your writing. You could have great ideas but not know how to articulate them best in material. So I'm going to help you with that. And if you're a brand new, out-of-the-box, never done comedy before person, you're going to benefit from this class especially. So join me August 11, 18, 25, 8 till 10 p.m. Central Standard Time for this one-time, first-time, $99 class special. All right, we're going to get into the episode right now. Thanks to Ray Price for sponsoring us through Patreon. I'll tell you more about that at the end, but here is Storytelling Tips with Dave Bricker. I'm on the call this morning with Dave Bricker of Story Sailing. Dave's down in the Miami, Florida area. How's it going this morning, sir?
Fantastic, given the circumstances we're all dealing with.
I found out about you through a mutual friend, and then I started looking at your website, and I'm like, I think I may have passed this guy in the hallway at an NSA meeting or something sometime in the past, but your whole thing is story sailing. You sailed earlier in your life. You still do a little bit. But you went searching for stories, and I want you to get into that a little bit. What drove you to go look for stories and to do it on a boat nonetheless?
Well, I was a private prep school kid, and I kind of doing the straight and narrow path thing. And I guess I always had certain creative tendencies and but I thought adventures happened in books and movies. That wasn't something you did in real life. And what happened is I got a summer job after my first year of college. I was working on an art project. And on that project, I met some people who lived on sailboats, and they told me about all of these faraway places they'd been and the great adventures they'd had. And I wanted stories of my own. And that's pretty much what inspired me.
That's cool. I remember in high school and again in college reading Old Man and the Sea, and I just thought, man, that's beautiful but horrifying at the same time. When you were out on the boat, I mean, how many times did you come up against a storm or some rough waters where you thought, this could be it?
That happens, but how many times does it happen on the expressway? People, oh, you sailed across the Atlantic, you're so brave. And I think sometimes, well, how many hours do you spend every week on the expressway? How many hours do you spend every year on the expressway? Hundreds of people sail across the Atlantic Ocean every year, and their odds of survival are probably much better than the average commuters.
Yeah, I don't doubt that at all, especially, I don't know, where I live now, we're getting pretty bad. So, yeah, it might be safer where there's less people to bump into. That's for sure. Well, that's cool. So you said you went to prep school and you started searching for these stories and stuff. What kind of were your first stories that you found when you were out there? Did you put too much of a demand on finding the stories at first, or did you learn to let them happen and come to you?
Well, I didn't. I guess what happened is once I got hooked on the sailing thing and ended up living out in the sailboat anchorage, the stories started to happen naturally. I think the first thing that happened was the characters happened. And when, people who live like that off the grid tend to become caricatures of themselves. There's no particular social archetype. Everybody's just different. And I got to know the people, and I got to know their boats, and I got to know their stories. And that stuff just kind of came to me. And then when I was 23 and I was still in college, I was finishing up, I bought my first sailboat for $3,000 and began to fix that boat up and get it ready for my journey. And same thing, I ran into setbacks and sailing the boat. I had the usual mishaps. I ran aground and hit weather that I wasn't quite ready to deal with, but learned real fast. And I think stories are everywhere. And as soon as I opened myself up and began to look for them, I didn't have to look too hard. They came to me.
That's interesting. And before I start getting into more of the storytelling stuff, I'm one more curious question about braving the seas. I don't think I'd be able to fall asleep. I'm sure I would get exhausted at some point and have to fall asleep. But when you put yourself down for the night and you're still in the water, how do you know you're going to be heading the right direction when you wake up in the morning?
Well, there are times if you're near land or shipping where you do stay up all night, sometimes for a couple of nights, and you sort of cat nap and doze off in the cockpit, but you stay on watch. When I did my Atlantic crossing, it was a friend and I and his young daughter. And, at night when we were out in the middle of the ocean away from the shipping lanes, we'd shorten sail and let the autopilot steer. But I think I woke up every 20 minutes, half an hour, poked my head out the hatch, and if I saw lights on the horizon or weather on the horizon or sensed any change in the way the boat was moving or the sound of the waves, I'd be up and in the cockpit. So it is possible to stand watch and sleep at the same time.
I guess you have an extra sensory thing that heightens when you're out on the water and you're just hyper aware.
Yeah, it's like rowing. When you row backwards. You're facing away from where you're going, but after a while you develop the sense you don't hit anything, you don't crash into boats and things. Yeah, you look over your shoulder some, but you just know.
That's interesting. And so when it comes to storytelling, speakers and comedians listen to this podcast, and you're out there collecting those stories, noticing different characters. What were some of the ways that I'm sure some of these are indelible images that are in your mind forever, but the ones that may have been periphery characters or smaller stories, how did you collect those and catalog those or keep them so that you could access them later?
Well, some of them I actually wrote down, and I had a film camera, if anyone remembers those. I had a 35 millimeter camera, and I still have pictures of those times and those people, and a picture will really jog your memory. But after I'd been gone for a little while, sailing a little while, I got access to a computer, and my background's graphic design. My MFA is in graphic design. So I didn't have an MFA at that time, but I had design background. So I put together a little tongue-in-cheek Captain Dave's Nautical News and sent it out to friends and family. And years later, when I was putting the memoir together, I had all of those articles and things I'd written and jogged a lot of memory. It all came back.
Yeah, just collecting those things on the day-to-day kind of keeps it current, and then you just build up that huge catalog full of things to go back to. So that's great. Some people don't like to journal, but I find just a few things each day in a notepad helps me remember that day and some of the bigger events. And like you say, just as a picture triggers a memory, just a couple of notes will trigger the memory of the bigger story, huh?
Absolutely.
When I tell stories in my show, so I'm a comedian, and I have stories that I think I kind of wrote backwards. So I have something funny happens, and then I try to figure out how to make that funny thing happen to me if it wasn't me. And then I try to figure out how can I make that relevant to my audience so I can get into it. And then I end up building a series of jokes around that incident. And then if I have a second angle on the incident, it grows a little bigger. And I usually try to have 3 different angles to where it grows to be a 4 to 5 minute piece. But I feel like I've written the story backwards, and there's probably some things that are crucial to stories that I might be leaving out or not having tapped into to explore yet. So just for the basic layperson, the story has to have a few crucial elements. What would those be?
Well, I'll tell you, a story represents a journey from conflict to transformation. And there's more to it than that. But think of a story as a sailboat containing, it could be a group of people or community, but it's usually a main character. And that character is lost on the rocky, stormy seas of conflict. And what they want to do is get to the safe port of transformation. Now, if you are telling, for example, let's take something like an insurance company ad or an anti-smoking ad. Very often the insurance company will show wrecked cars and burned houses, or the anti-tobacco campaign will show yellowed teeth and fingers and wrinkled skin, or an x-ray of lungs. And it doesn't work because it's the conflict. Whereas if you sell elderly people enjoying time with their grandchildren, or you show somebody finishing a marathon, that's actually much more engaging. So I think one of the mistakes people make when storytelling is they focus on the conflict and not so much on the transformation. And the conflict turns people off and scares people away. The story is driven by conflict, but it's got to be going, what is it where do they have to go? What do they have to fix? How are they going to save the universe? Whatever it is, the story moves from conflict to transformation. Another way you hear this in marketing is they say sell the benefits, not the features.
Got it. And we talked on the phone last week, and you had a phrase that I really like called the unfinished symphony. And we were talking about when somebody creates tension in a story or in a room and never relieves that tension. So is that kind of what you're talking about, where the transformation didn't happen maybe in some of those stories?
Well, that's one thing. If I were to tell you, a friend called me up last night and said some very threatening things to me. That's it. That's the story. All of a sudden, you're like, wait a second, what happened? I mean, nobody called me. I just made it up as an example. That's the unfinished symphony, where you've actually deprived somebody of an ending. And that's why we'll watch really bad movies and television, just to find out how the story ends. And at the end, we kick ourselves for doing it. Oh, why did I watch that? I knew it was going to be lame from the first 10 minutes, but I had to find out how it ends. So that's what I call the unfinished symphony story. Gotcha. But the conflict and transformation thing, more, I think it manifests itself where somebody will say, let me tell you about my speaking program, and I talk about this and I talk about that, and I've spoken here and I've spoken there, and I've worked for these clients and I've worked for those clients. That's great, but why are they going to hire you to speak? What problem do you solve for the audience? So, for example, if you speak about employee engagement, and you want to teach companies how to attract and retain talent. Now think about a tech company. Every time they hire a new employee, it's about 15 grand in onboarding costs between their computer and software licensing and their training and their equipment. Now, if one of those employees leaves, that means they lost that 15 grand and they have to hire somebody else at a cost of 15 grand. So it's a big deal. Now, if you can teach them to do that, whatever you're charging to speak is inconsequential. They're not paying you to run your pie hole for 45 minutes. It's not about speaking, it's about solving problems. And I see in the speaking industry, for example, a lot of people talk about themselves, they talk about what they do, but they don't talk about the outcomes that they produce for people. And the golden rule of storytelling is that stories are always about people. Even if they're about talking animals or aliens, at least metaphorically, they're always about people.
Got it. Are there things that people do in creating a story that makes it hard or confusing for the audience? I hear sometimes speakers introduce 2 or 3 characters in a story, but really there was only one that was relevant, and you're like, they probably just introduced those other 2 people because they were there in real life, but they didn't contribute to the story, so you really could get rid of those, couldn't you?
Which really, I think, speaks to the idea that storytelling is not journalism. And your goal is to transform the listener or transform the audience. Your goal is not to lay out every painful detail of the truth just because it happened to happen that way. And I like that. Ultimately, if you're trying to produce an outcome for an audience, if you need to make up a character or omit a character, I'll give you an example. In my sailing memoir, it's called The Blue Monk, which was the name of my sailboat when I was young. It was named after Thelonious Monk, the jazz pianist, had a tune called Blue Monk. And there's a place in the book where I kind of island hop through the Abacos, the northern Bahamas. And we start here, we go to this island, and we sail for a couple of hours and go to this island and sail all day and go to that island. And that's great. Now, in reality, I visited those different islands on 5 or 6 or 8 different trips. But why would I make my reader do all of that anchoring and all of that sailing? What I really want to do is talk to them about the islands and the different characters of the individual islands. So I eliminated a lot of navigating from the story. And if somebody wants to call me a liar, that's fine. But I think it's a better book and a better story because I trimmed it down to serve the reader.
And I think that's something we forget often. I think speakers evolve in different ways, but most of us try to accumulate enough material to speak for an hour. And so there's a lot of filler in there. And then once we start getting good at telling stories, we might get a few better gigs, but we don't move beyond that because we haven't increased the value that we give our audiences, and we haven't cut the filler out. So there's constantly that cycle of building stuff up, then trimming it down to what's necessary, then adding more to it, right?
And it's even more important when you're speaking, because there have been times where I've been reading a book and I think, wait a second, there's a character here. I don't remember the introduction. Maybe I was just tired or not paying attention. And I can go back and thumb through the pages and find where their name gets referenced and reread. When you're speaking, anything extraneous, any extraneous characters, any extraneous events, if it doesn't have to be in the story, get it out, because nobody has that written reference. And they want to follow that simple story track and really understand the journey from conflict to transformation.
And that was kind of another question I had too. Are there certain differences in the storytelling from the point of view, if you're writing it out in a book and then you've got that story, but you're also giving a speech and you want to include that story, are there some things that you do more as a presenter and less of a storyteller in that situation?
I'm as a writer, and I probably write 1,500 words a day. I love writing. But when you're writing, you can get into these nuances and details, and you can go all Herman Melville and use your big words and long descriptions. And it's great because the art form lends itself to maximizing, flexing your English muscles, flexing your language muscles. When you're on a stage, people don't want to wade through all of that stuff. If you really want to bore yourself to death, go to an author's open mic and listen to everybody read the first chapter of their book. It's like being bitten to death by ducks. why is it so boring? Some of these are good books, and it's because this stuff was never written to be read out loud. It's got all of the filler and stuff that you might luxuriate in while you're reading it. But while you're listening to it and you're sitting on an uncomfortable metal chair and you're waiting to get through 10 authors, it's like, oh, please don't do this to me. Cut it down.
But there's crucial elements you have to keep in there, I'm sure. We talk about the arc of a story, and so in a very basic sense, we've got the conflict and the transformation, but what are some points along that arc that change our characters?
Well, let me give you the other two elements, and story arc is important. That's the journey from conflict to transformation. Now, if you've got, say, a novel or something like that, what you might have is a point where the character fights the first battle and wins, and then they realize that they've got to cross the mountain, and then they start hiking up the mountain, and then they meet the guide along the way, and then they get to the top of the mountain and they realize it's a sheer cliff and they've got to go back, and that's another chapter. So setting up these sub conflicts that carry the main character toward the ultimate goal, that their ultimate transformation, can be part of the story arc. But there are two more elements of this story sailing model. So we talked about the voyage from conflict to transformation. In order for a sailboat to make that journey, the water's got to be deep enough. And if you run aground on a sailboat, especially at high tide, the tide goes out, the boat slowly falls over, you end up sleeping on the wall and waiting for the tide to come up in the morning, and then using anchors and sails and engines and towboats and things to get you off. It's not fun. And it's interesting that we use this word deep to describe stories, to describe people. If the water's not deep enough, if the conflict is not authentic, that's also going to keep people from being interested in the story. So I'll give you an example of a story that's not very deep. If Dudley's father decides to buy him a brand new Porsche 911 for his 16th birthday, and he sends the butler to take him to the Porsche dealership, and he says, you can't have yellow, you can only have red, and Dudley really wants yellow, we just don't care, because he's an entitled little snot who's getting a Porsche on his 16th birthday, and boo-hoo, take the red one and go home,
Right.
stop whining. We don't care. We care if he has a situation where his value system changes and he becomes a bigger, better person. So is the story authentic? And I don't know if you have kids. I know a lot of our listeners do. And at some point you ask your kid to do something and they say, why? You say, well, I just think it's a good idea to get this needs to get done. And they say, why? Think, well, because I really just think it would be a good idea. Why? And you finally say, because I said so. And you become that parent you swore you would never become. But if we ask why, if we keep asking why of ourselves, we get to the authentic conflict. And in business stories, for example, everybody wants to make money, but that's not the authentic conflict. The authentic conflict has to do with really survival level things, amygdala level, fight or flight level things. It has to do with food, love, shelter, status, safety, things of that nature that are deeply ingrained. And money might be a means to obtain those things, but it is not the authentic conflict. And when you find that authentic conflict, it drives the story.
Yeah,
and and I'll just finish because there's one more element. The sailboat needs wind, and wind is magic. It's invisible, but it's powerful. And this is where every individual, every person has their own particular unique magic. There's no competition. It can be talent, insight, experience. It can be equipment. It can be education. It could be a team. Whatever it is that they bring is their unique magic. And that's what makes their boat move, and it's what makes the listener and reader's boat move.
Yeah, I'm glad you got to win, because that to me sounds like the most fascinating part. And that's, as the speaker, maybe the thing that we have different from the next speaker. We have a different wind. Some of us, I could get into really funny, some of us are very windy and never get anywhere. But yeah, we that's the thing that we harness maybe slightly differently than the other story sailors, as our own personal wind. But in the stories we tell, that we tell, the audience should be a character, if not the main character, almost 99% of the time, right?
If you're speaking and you're talking about yourself, what is it? My father said, narcissism is the only disease where the sicker you are, the better you feel. Nobody wants to watch a speaker get up on the stage and talk about himself for 45 minutes or an hour, even if their story's interesting. So, for example, when I talk about, if I tell a story about crossing an ocean or running aground or getting lost, I very quickly dial that into the oceans that my clients need to cross, that my listeners need to cross. Themes like trusting your compass. We all need to learn to trust our compass and battle those voices of self-doubt. A great nautical lesson is, being a captain. When you're in charge, when you're the captain, whatever happens on your boat is your fault, no matter who screwed it up. How many people can stand to learn that lesson? So even if you're telling your own stories, you've got to tell them about the audience, or people are going to pick up their phones.
I do think in our marketing, everything is a story. And if we just look today, the people that are listening to this podcast, if you just look at your website and ask yourself, is there a story here? And there's not, there's a huge opportunity to talk about the conflict and the transformation for your audiences that you should address pretty quickly and update, right?
And it's about the outcome. What outcomes do you produce? What problems do you solve? What do you do for people? Because everybody's got their oceans to cross, their mountains to climb, their woods to find their way out of, whatever it may be, whatever metaphor you use. And speakers use a lot of these different metaphors, and it's part of what makes us all different based on our equipment, our experience, our equipment, our knowledge, whatever it is. But this idea of take that metaphor, make that story about, make your story a metaphor for the listener's story, for the audience's story.
Yeah, a lot of times we might have a great story and not use it because we don't know where it fits, but there's that higher universal theme that is behind every story. And if you're not sure what that is, typically it's, if you ask yourself the question, what made me write this down or tell this story, that will give you an indication to what that universal theme is. And as humans, we all share those, and those are the little clues and cues of where to put those into your presentations.
Right. And, I have stories that are in the sailing memoir, that are in the Blue Monk, and there's some of my favorite stories I've never told on stage because they're more like literature than business fables. And I've never been able to find a way to plug those particular stories into the lessons that I want to teach, my reason for being on the stage. If someone's paying me to be on a stage, or I don't care if I'm on the stage for free, but I've been asked to be there, my job is to serve that audience, not get my stories out of my system. And too many speakers are up there, doing their therapy on the stage.
Right. And I don't get paid enough to do that, to be the therapist for a speaker. That's crazy. Well, we are in interesting times now where we're presenting more from home, from our computer, through Zoom sessions and all these webinars and things. I'm curious if there's differences or things we should be extra aware of when we present virtually that can help us serve our customers and our clients better through this computer screen, as opposed to being there in the room where you have the energy and everybody's physically in the same space.
Well, funny you should ask, because I just published a book on this called Speak Inside the Box. And as the lockdown hit us and we all went home, I thought, okay, we're home and I might be home for a while. I don't know how long, but it's going to be longer than they like to say it is, given the graph of the infection and how quickly it's setting in and how slowly we're getting past the cusp of the curve. And I started doing a lot of research on this because in the speaking business, all of us, our calendars just got wiped out. It's the meeting industry apocalypse. And So I thought, what's different? And the first time I sat down and did a virtual presentation, I was amazed at how lame I was. I used a lot of filler words and ers and ums and ahs, and I didn't really use my vocal range. And I did an online meeting. I did a conversation. So when we sit in front of a screen, especially if we're used to using Zoom or Skype or video conferencing software, we tend not to use our speaker range. We tend to just stay monodynamic and be in conversation mode. Well, we're having a conversation right now and it works fine. But if I was presenting, I want to back away from the screen. Actually, I've now got a green screen and a camera mounted on the wall on the far side of my small office. And I give my presentations on my feet with a stage in the background, because it's just, I want to try to deliver that big stage experience. What happens when you're in an online meeting is, hang on, I've got a visitor coming in. Come on, baby. What happens when you're trying to do a presentation at home, the dog knocks on the door. Was that perfect timing or what? I didn't stage that.
That's great.
But you've got somebody's face 1.5 feet, 2 feet in front of your face. And if you get loud, if you use your big speaker voice, you would never do that when you were 2 feet away from somebody. It would be considered confrontational. So there's an instinct to kind of shrink to fit when you're speaking inside the box. And another thing that happens is, think about the average person using their laptop. A laptop is marvelous. It's got a keyboard, a microphone, and a webcam and a mouse all within a foot of each other. Well, perfect for casual conversation. But if you put that camera where it's looking you right in the face, now the keyboard's up here where you can't use it. If you back away far enough so that you've got room to use your hands on the screen and really use your big gestures and things, now the automatic mic sensitivity goes up and you're hearing the sirens in the neighborhood and things like that. So another thing I think people can do is uncouple all of that stuff. The laptop is a marvelous marriage of convenience, but get a better webcam than the one that comes with your laptop. Get a Bluetooth keyboard so you can raise that laptop up to eye level so that you're looking right into the camera, and get a lavalier mic so that you can back away and the mic will follow you and filter out ambient noise. And then we can get into lights and green screens and all sorts of stuff that I'll probably skip the techno Babylon unless you want me to go there. It's all in the book.
That's great. And the book's on your website, right?
The book is on the website and it's on Amazon. It's called Speak Inside the Box. And it's a guide to virtual speaking. And whether you're speaking at meetings or you're trying to retool your speaking and presentation business, it takes you through the gear you need, mastering the online meetings, and then building a virtual stage with a green screen and lights and things like that. And it doesn't go into massive detail because it would make the book thick and techy, but it gives you the basics that you need as far as understanding what the ingredients are. And then you can go to YouTube University and look up all the details about how to light your green screen and all of that stuff. So it's a basics book. It's a primer.
It's a concept kind of book. It gets you thinking. And when we talked on the phone last week, you told me something interesting you did so you could visualize the audience as far as seeing faces when you're speaking to kind of keep yourself engaged. Can you tell us about that real quick?
Well, something I'm actually in the middle of doing this, because I find that if I'm speaking and I'm standing on the stage and my monitor's off to the side, I tend to look over at the monitor to see how people are reacting. I've got Zoom and gallery view. So I'm actually putting a second monitor up directly underneath my camera so that I can look right into the faces of my audience. But if that's not an option, to put a monitor or an iPad or something up there where you can see, feed off the audience reaction, which is so important for speakers, then at least clip some photos out of magazines and put them on a board and glue that board up on the wall, pin that board on the wall in front of your camera. If nothing else, cut out a pair of eyes and put them next to your webcam. Get yourself in a position where you're speaking to people. Stories are always about people. And you got to get past the technology and engage with humanity on some level, even if you're tricking yourself on some level.
That's great for presenting to groups, but also just making videos from your desk that people consume. The more it looks like you're speaking on a stage, now they're not going to think that you are if you've got a backdrop, but the more you put them in that mental space of this guy's professional, he's delivering it to me, he's keeping eye contact, the more you keep it realistic, the more it tells that story. It helps deliver that story.
Right. And it's like business fashion. I mean, if you were going to go give a speech at a convention, you wouldn't wear scruffy jeans and a t-shirt. It would be disrespectful to the audience. And I think that on-screen appearance is the new business fashion. That expensive pair of heels or that designer sport jacket, they're all hanging in the closet now.
Right.
And especially the heels will never be seen on the screen. But invest a little bit in lights and a background and a green screen. Even if you're presenting in your chair, you have this much better appearance. You look bright and clear, and people can see you and jump on your average Zoom meeting. And of course, this is new to a lot of people. They're just trying to figure out what to do to make the technology work. But more and more, you're going to see people learning not to present in front of a bright window, people lighting themselves properly, people adjusting their cameras. There's software where you can adjust the zoom and the lighting on your webcam. Plenty of ways to improve your appearance on screen. And God forbid it costs you a couple or $300 to get some lights and things. I know it's tough times for everybody, for me too. But if you want to be a professional, this is what it takes. You don't have to buy high-end cameras and things, but something to look clear and colorful and sharp and make a good impression.
This definitely isn't the time to cut back and scale down. It's a time to adjust and pivot and learn how to adapt. And if it costs a few bucks, think of what it will really cost you if you don't make some changes right now, right? The losing business down the road.
And I'm all for improvising. I mean, if all you have is a desk light, that bright bulb is going to cast, hot spots on your face, but cover it with a white towel. Or I have a little LED light on my desk right now, and it's really bright. It doesn't have a diffusion screen. I can't even look into it. It'll blind me. And I folded a paper towel over about 4 times and rubber banded it over the lens because it's LEDs. It makes no heat. And that's illuminating this side of my face right now. It's just perfect. A little light on my desk. So improvise, lights and LEDs. And if you can't buy the studio gear, just find ways to light up your face.
That's great. And then as we get ready to leave here, I'm going to send everybody to your website, storysailing.com, and they can look up Dave Bricker. You've got plenty of written books out there if people like to read. Is it 15, 20 books? How many have you written at this point?
I've done a dozen books.
Okay.
From novels, the sailing memoirs, The Blue Monk. I've got a little book for speakers, storytelling for speakers, which is called Story Sailing. And I've got some speaking exercises, which are excerpts from famous speeches like the Gettysburg Address, and the book teaches you how to break them down and find the emphasis words. I've got all sorts of geeky books available about speaking and writing, and you can find them on the website. And there is also, I send out a blog post every 2 weeks. I don't want to inundate people. And it's usually a storytelling topic, though lately I've been focusing more on virtual speaking being an important element of storytelling, but writing, speaking, it's all there. And I'll be doing blog post number 50. So this will be two weeks coming up on Tuesday.
That's great.
Or 2 years, rather, coming up on Tuesday.
That's great. Well, there's tons of stuff on your website for people to dig into. I think they'll know just from listening to this interview that you've got great observational skills on how to convey storytelling to speakers. I've learned a few things, a couple of quotes today really stand out. And one is basically taking people from the conflict to the transformation is super important in all stories. Putting your audience in the story, super important. And then also that storytelling isn't journalism. I really like that. That really breaks it down to alleviate a lot of the stress of trying to include every detail and helping the people get to the story clearly. So those alone were great just from my quick listen today as we talk, but there's so much knowledge in there. People can find out more about you, like I said, at storyselling.com. Before we leave, is there one piece of insight or wisdom that we didn't get to that maybe you hoped that is helpful for new speakers, new comedians, as well as people who've been at it for a while?
Well, I'd like to go briefly into two places. My advice for new speakers is it's a journey, not a destination. And if you go to your first NSA convention and you'll see the old timers who have known each other for decades and kind of grown through their speaking careers together, and it's easy to deify those people. And they've been at the business a long time ago, for a long time, and some of them are immensely talented. But you'll get there. Just keep working on your speaking. Keep reading. Keep speaking. My friend Bruce Turkel always says, if you want to speak more, speak more. Take those Rotary Club gigs, whatever you can do to be of service to an audience, and then lather, rinse, repeat. Keep doing it. Keep refining it. If you keep speaking, you'll keep getting better. And don't compare yourself to anybody, and don't worry about where you're at now. Just keep growing. The last one I wanted to just touch on, because Rick, your whole thing is comedy. And I think one of the things we haven't quite got to yet is comedy. And just as you develop a story awareness, I'm always looking for stories. Sometimes I'll explore, maybe I'll go down that street or take that detour, because it could be that nothing happens and the story is that I wasted my time, but it could be that I meet somebody or see something that I wouldn't otherwise see. And taking those chances, putting yourself in the way of potential stories is important. And I think it's the same thing with jokes. So I know that, I've done a number of humorous speech contests, and I always have a place in a humorous speech where I've got something to plug in that's from the room, from the day. And whether it has something to do with the food or the name tags, or I'll find something that's absurd in the room, and I make it my mission. The moment I walk in there, I'm thinking, okay, I've got a speech to do. I've got 45 minutes before I'm on stage, and I'm going to find something ludicrous in this room that I can plug into my speech so that people know that I'm not just memorizing, that I'm pulling from their environment. And just as you become story aware, I think you can become humor aware and find that funny wherever you go, wherever you look. And it just makes your life a lot more fun. That's why they call it funny.
I love it. Thanks for bringing it there to close. That's a great point. And if we keep the same routines, we don't try anything new, we're not going to have any new stories, and we're not going to have any new tales or new characters to implement. So get out there, experience life a little bit, whether you got to do it virtually now and visit some people online, or go out there and meet them in person and stay 6 feet away. There's stories to be told, and I'm sure speakers and comedians will have decades of material from this current lockdown. So take advantage of looking around for what the interesting things are that might not be the crucial sad stories right now, but there's some uplifting things and some powerful stuff going on around us. So good stories everywhere, comedy everywhere. Make notes.
And it's more important to find that comedy. I mean, remember, comedy got people, not comedy, but humor got people through the Holocaust. Humor gets people through the worst of situations. And right now we're locked down. Some of us are locked down alone, and it's tough. That's not the case with me. I'm here with my wife and my daughter, and I've got dogs, and I work at home anyway. It hasn't affected me. I know other people who are climbing the walls, but there's humor in that too. You can make fun of yourself and your situation, and people are doing that. And we've got social media for sharing, and we've got Zoom and Skype and things like that for face-to-face connection. And stories are always about people. Connect with your people and share the joyful things in life.
It's super. Well, Dave, I hope anybody that was listening at the beginning and had a lot of conflict in their life had some kind of transformation during this podcast and came out on the other end a little bit better. I really appreciate your time. I know you're busy. You've got things going on. So thanks for fitting me in. Everybody, go to storyselling.com. Check out Dave Bricker. Dave, thanks so much. It was excellent.
Rick, thanks for having me. It's been an honor to be on your show.
Oh, yeah. yeah, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Dave Bricker. I could talk to Dave for days. He knows how to tell a story. He knew how to keep our audience involved and listening in this podcast. As you could tell, you're still here. But he can teach you this. He's got a great website. It's called storysailing.com, SAILING, just like the boat, storysailing.com. He's got some free tutorials on the website. He's got some great videos on there. His site looks great. He's got a book we mentioned, Speak Inside the Box. That's available on Amazon.com. I have a link to that in the show notes as well, so you can go to the show notes page here at schooloflaughs.com, episode 20, whatever this is, and check out some more information about Dave. But again, it's Bricker, Bricker. He's a speaker, trainer, coach. He can teach you how to make your stories pop. And he's just got a lot of great stuff on his website. So check him out. Thanks, Dave, for joining us today. Thanks to everybody who's still with the podcast here, over 200 episodes in, still finding incredible people to interview and things to learn. I'm a lifelong learner myself and excited to keep doing this. Thanks again to Ray Price for sponsoring. And again, if you want to join our live through Zoom online classes Tuesday, August 11, 18, and 25 from 8 till 10 p.m. Central Standard Time, join up. You can send a quick email to schooloflaughs@gmail.com and just put in the subject line, live Zoom August writing class. Something to that effect, and I'll get back to you and sign you up. Let's do this thing. All right, you guys take care, stay safe, and stay funny.
Thanks for listening to the School of Laughs podcast. If you'd like to hear more School of Laughs podcasts, you can find them on iTunes and Stitcher.com. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. For information on upcoming live and online classes, visit schooloflaughs.com. Until next time, stay tuned, stay focused, and stay funny.